Now, whether you want to take the Franz route of being an incredibly obnoxious, edgy person and making everybody hate you, that's up to you. I wouldn't recommend it. What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA, and if you've watched my channel before, you know that I try my very hardest to be a positive person. But no matter how hard I try, I'm not perfect. Sometimes I do let the little things get to me. For example, when people ask me if I'm in line at Starbucks when I'm standing like 3.5 feet from the counter. Well, yes, of course I'm in line. Like, what else would I be doing here? You think I'm just standing here like staring at how awesome their cash register is? So although I do admittedly get more angry about dumb stuff like that than I probably should, the one thing I don't get angry about is bands. And that is what we're here to talk about today. Those bands that just seem to be like a lightning rod for internet hate. The bands that seem to make half the internet like super angry for the mere fact that they exist. But like I always do on this channel, I'm going to try to put a positive spin on it and talk about what we can learn from these bands in terms of marketing. But before I get into it, I want to really quickly plug two things. Number one, my Instagram. You guys know I've been putting a lot more effort into my content over there over the past couple months. So if you like this video, check that out. There's a link in the description. And second, I also wanted to plug my Patreon. Patrons get access to a bunch of cool perks, audio podcast version of all the videos. You get access to a private Discord server. You can get the chance to have your band or podcast or YouTube channel reviewed. If you would be interested in checking that out, there's also a link to that in the description. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. Band number one is Emmure. I started by asking myself, well, why do people hate Emmure so much? And it took me a while to figure it out because, I don't know, I think they're a pretty good band. Why do people just absolutely despise this band so much? I couldn't quite figure it out, and then it came to me. The reason is very simple. They wear hats. Because as I've learned recently from my comments section, if there's one thing that metal nerds hate, it's hats. Now, their haters certainly won't admit that. What they'll tell you is that it's because Emmure's music is simplistic garbage that a kindergartner could play, that they only use one string. Maybe if you're lucky, they'll even post one of those outdated Emmure tab jokes from like 2011. But I'm not sure that really holds up, because if we're honest, if you listen to newer Meshuggah, it sounds a whole lot like a less aggressive. And the same people who absolutely despise Emmure love Meshuggah to an equally strong extent. So if it was just about the music, well, they would hate Meshuggah as much as they hate Emmure, and they don't. So it can't be the music, it's gotta be something else, and that's why I keep going back to the hats. So for any of you hat haters, I got a treat. Can't wait to hear what my comments section has to say about these bad boys. But in all seriousness, I really do think that it's mostly because of the way they look. And honestly, it's pretty sad, but you see this a lot in metal. Another example of that I've talked about a lot before is Suicide Silence. Honestly, I think if Mitch looked like your typical schlubby death metal dude, they would have been accepted. Like if he had a big beard and cargo shorts and those weird like unbranded plain black sneakers that you only see on metal guys at NAMM or people who work at McDonald's. And honestly, that's just sad. I mean, this is high school shit, right? Like hating somebody because they have the wrong fucking haircut. But let's be honest, metal fans are probably actually the most shallow and judgmental, the most exclusionary of all the fan bases. Those are the guys that are gonna give you the most hate for the way you look. If you don't have the right uniform and the right haircut, then you're not in the club. You don't get to sit at their table at lunch.
Now, if you break any of these rules, you can't sit with us at lunch.
Anyhow, I'm actually happy to say that I think the tide has turned. There's still certainly people that hate Emmure, but I think in general they're starting to be respected now, as they should be. And this kind of corresponds to, I think, two things. The first one being that now nu metal is cool to like, and the second one is that their last album was fucking awesome. Like, definitely, without a doubt, the best thing they've ever done. But you know what the best thing about Emmure is? That Frankie wrote not one, but 2 songs about sucking dick.
Go what my dick tastes right.
Band number 2 is Bring Me the Horizon.
In the beginning there was Count Your Blessings, and lo, it was declared gay by the metal elitists.
Now these guys have a very interesting story because they've done what no other band, as far as I can think of, has managed to do. They've gone from being hated to loved to being hated again. And in a couple more years, they're probably gonna be loved again. I think that's actually kind of their thing. They're hated, loved, hated, loved, hated, loved.
I'm gonna light this shit on fire. Throw it out the fucking window.
So let's start from the beginning. If you turn back the clock, I don't know, 12, 13 years, you will remember that this band was just absolutely fucking hated by all the tastemakers and gatekeepers, all the elitists and snobs. They were like the most hated band of probably, 2007 or so. And again, it wasn't their music, although a lot of people did hate deathcore back then. They attracted a disproportionate amount of hate relative to other deathcore bands, I think mostly for being the flagship band of the whole scene thing that was popping off at the time. And although I personally never hated them, I get it. It's just kind of the natural order of things that the older generation looks down on and hates whatever the younger generation is doing. Bring Me the Horizon was the biggest band in that scene. Ollie was the king of it, and so naturally they were kind of the lightning rod for all the hate that was directed at the like scene, emo, metalcore, deathcore thing.
Fucking emo John Lennon look like he's got shit stained on his face. He snorts shit. Look at it.
Now, I'd like to give you an idea of how people talked about them back then, but it's actually going to be difficult for me to do that without repeating a bunch of homophobic slurs that I'd prefer not to use. So what I'm going to do is substitute the word banana for the homophobic slur.
Bring Me the Horizon? What a bunch of emo bananas.
Oh my god, I hate them. They're like the most generic, trendy banana deathcore.
Ollie Sykes is such a banana. They're only popular because girls like him because of his banana haircut.
But then the tables started to turn. First thing is they stopped playing deathcore and started playing what I guess you would call metalcore, but really is more like heavy Linkin Park. And within a couple years, the tone of how people talked about the band was just completely different. Instead of being almost universally hated for being banana deathcore, now they were almost universally respected for being this fresh, innovative new rock band.
And this latest LP of theirs is allegedly their most creative and ambitious musical endeavor yet, and a breath of fresh air.
All is well in the kingdom of Bring Me the Horizon, right? Wrong. The tables turned on them again earlier this year when they released their latest album, Amo. And if you haven't heard it, it's basically like a poppy rock record. There's only one kind of sort of heavy song in the whole thing, and people are not happy about it. It's incredibly ironic. At first, people hated them for being a deathcore band. Now they hate them for not being a deathcore band.
Why don't you go back to playing Count Your Blessings?
And as always, Bring the Horizon, I think, was one step ahead of their fan base. I think they saw this one coming because they actually have a song about this on the album called Heavy Metal.
Crimson Kid on the gram said he used to be a fan, but this shit ain't heavy metal.
How good are those lyrics, right? Like when they're talking about the angry metal nerd on Instagram, you can picture exactly who they mean. So that's where we're at now. They went from being hated to loved to hated again. And as far as I'm aware, they're the only band who has pulled off the amazing feat of being hated twice in their career for diametrically opposite reasons. Nice work, boys.
I'm a bad motherfucker, not a fucking role model. Rock church, hit a phone, nigga, smash a fucking bottle.
And band number 3, Attila. Now these guys are a little bit different than the first two because unlike those bands, Attila wants you to hate them. They're a troll band, or I guess more accurately I would say, I would put it in pro wrestling terms, they're a heel band. But it wasn't always that way, and I think this is actually a really interesting thing to look at from like a brand management perspective. So they've actually been around for almost 15 years now, but for the first half of their career, they were basically toiling away in obscurity as a, you know, pretty good but unremarkable metalcore band that nobody really cared about. Just one of those bands where there's nothing wrong with them, but there's nothing really right with them either. They just kind of exist. But still, you could tell that they were trying. They were looking for that thing that was going to help them stand out and break through to that next level. For example, when Franz went on the MTV show Made.
I was about 16 years old when the show aired on MTV, and it was awesome. I can say it was definitely a great experience.
They were looking, but they didn't find it until 2013 when they released the video for About That Life and became one of the most hated bands in the genre overnight. That video was like a big shot of steroids for their career right in the ass. That was the breakthrough moment that they were looking for.
She fucks me all night, and she counts my money while I'm on my PlayStation.
Their story actually reminds me of a UFC fighter named Chael Sonnen for all you MMA fans. Now these days, Chael is one of the biggest names in the sport, one of the most recognizable guys from the UFC, but it wasn't always that way. For the first half of his career, he was a lot like Attila. He was a very good, like decent fighter that fought in a lot of these B-level shows, but nobody really gave a shit about him. But that changed like halfway through his career in about like 2010 when he decided to turn heel.
I don't promote fights, I pick fights. I'm like John Jones, I sound like Sean Combs, and I got trombone-sized stones like John Holmes.
It was like almost overnight that he went from being this hardworking, humble like fighter that didn't really talk too much to just all of a sudden talking tons of crazy shit about the champion at the time, a guy named Anderson Silva.
How happy are you with your performance tonight?
Anderson Silva, you absolutely suck.
I think he was basically just tired of being ignored. He said, you know what, fuck it. I guess being a good fighter isn't enough. Let me try turning heel and talking a ton of shit and see if that works. Was it obnoxious? Yes, definitely. But you know what? It worked. And it was because he realized the same thing that Franz did. It doesn't matter how good you are if you can't get anybody to pay attention to what you're doing.
Listen, guys, if you're not willing to go too far, you will never go far enough in life.
You've got to do something to stand out, and unfortunately, one of the most effective ways to do that is to make loudmouth, obnoxious asshole your public persona. Now, personally, I think it's kind of sad that that whole thing works as well as it does, but that's the world we live in. You want to start a band where the premise is like, we're not going to have a flashy image, we're not going to make a bunch of noise on social media, we're just going to keep our heads down and make the best music we can, and we think people will notice. Good fucking luck with that. Enjoy being ignored for years until finally you just quit out of frustration because nobody gives a shit.
Why does anyone give Franz or whatever the his name is the attention he wants? Why don't you ask yourself that question, Ali? You're the one giving me attention on the internet. Thank you.
It's kind of sad to me that they had to basically turn heel in order to get any attention, because honestly the band is really fucking good on just a straight up musical basis. Like I talked about in another video, Franz is one of the absolute best vocalists in the game. The range of stuff that he does with his voice is amazing. The guys in the band can play their asses off. The production on About That Life in particular is just fucking absolutely crushing. But like I said, unfortunately, that doesn't matter. Being good at what you do is not enough. Yes, you need to be good at what you do, but you also need to be different. You've got to do something to break through the noise, make people notice you, pay attention to you, and give a shit about you. Now, whether you want to take the Franz route of being an incredibly obnoxious, edgy person and making everybody hate you, that's up to you. I wouldn't recommend it. But the larger point is, what are you going to do that's going to stand out, that's going to be different, and make people notice you?
Franz's forehead is bigger than my future. Is my forehead really that big? Yeah, it's fucking huge. Embrace the big forehead. That's where my big brain is. It's the reason I come up with big shit. And you're still on the internet talking shit.
All right, friends, that's it for me today. 3 of the most hated metalcore bands of all time. Let me know what you think in the comments about these bands, about other metalcore bands that people hated and why. Also, let me know if you think this is worth turning into a series. I can talk about more metalcore bands, some deathcore bands, some pop punk bands, some emo bands. I don't know. I can talk about a lot of bands in this series if you guys are interested. So if you are, let me know in the comments. And also, I want to thank everybody who supports me on Patreon at the True Cult level or above. And those people are Alexandra C, Andy B, Anthony C, Amber G, End of May, Jeff W, Jordan H, Justin H, Luke S, Michael B, Militant Me, Nick G, Ridley H, Ryan W, John R, and Wally P. You guys are true cult fans, and I appreciate your support very much. It really helps out a lot in a month like this where ad revenue is in the toilet, or when I get a video copyright claimed like I did with my new metal video last week. Your support really helps out a lot. If you would be interested in checking out the Patreon, there's a link to that in the description. And with that out of the way, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.